Board of Water Commission. I don't know if you all met the commissioners, but this is Scott Horsley, Mark Robinson, and David Sherlock. The chair currently is Scott Horsley. They do rotate the chairmanship, so I just want to make sure. And if you didn't see her before, she'll be back. It's Jen Nash, who was the administrator at the water department. There's Jen. Anything you want to know about the water department and your bills, everything else? Call them. So, and then, oh, I'm sorry, and Chris, our water superintendent. I didn't have to up here. It's also here. So again, thank you. One last shout out. Focus on your. Don't forget to join for your annual membership. We're having a big prize. It's $25 to lose. And we really appreciate it. Money goes towards supporting the 4th of July parade, puts into it, the cost of mailing our monthly to occurrence, both printing and postage. So every dollar is well spent for communicating and educating the villages that do it. So if you have any other questions about this, please see me after the meeting, but I'm going to turn it over now to Mark, who's going to talk about the water.
Yeah.
Drinking water.
Mark Robinson. I've been water commissioner now for almost 6 years, full years. I'm running for re-election. I hope you'll come out and vote Robinson in May 29th, is it? The 30th. What's the election day, Fran?
I think it's the 28th.
28th this year. So we'll be voting here in town in Freedom Hall. For fire commissioner, water commissioner, and credential committee, to be followed by
From 4 to 8.
from 4 to 8 p.m. And then they'll be followed by our annual meeting of the district, and that will be held here as well. Yeah. So that would be the following day. So that'll be the 29th. And we hope that everybody will show up for both of those. It's important that people participate in the district. It's a small district, yet there are those who love it. I'm one of them. Having grown up summers here and lived year round since 1980, really appreciate the fact that we can run our own little village. And we're going to talk tonight about some of the initiatives of the Water Commission and the Water Department. Before we do that, I'd like to recognize Vic Mastro as a former water commissioner, and Chris. Oh, yeah. He's very inconspicuous over there, but he's been the water superintendent of the Katuitt Water Department for 37 years now, and grew up in the village. And I think we're really lucky to have somebody with that kind of staying power in the position, and knows where every pipe and pump is, and knows most of the people that we serve. So very lucky to have such a great team. Two of the initiatives that we want to talk about tonight, I'm going to talk about one of them, Scott will talk about the other. It includes a policy to adjust the water rates. And the other is to talk about source water protection. That's what Commissioner Horsley will do in a little bit. And so last year at this time, I made a presentation to the Civic Association and also to a number of our water commissioner meetings regarding my strongly held belief that access to clean water is a human right. And it is in fact mentioned in the state constitution, the public's right to clean water and clean air. And we also have in the district's enabling legislation from 1935, the duty of the Katuitt Water Department to deliver water to the villagers. So with that in mind, we have adjusted the rates. They stayed pretty stagnant from 1995 up until 2019. We did a study with a water consultant that produced a very detailed financial analysis in order to change the rates in 2019, which the commissioners did. And that represented the first time in almost 20 years that the rates were raised. We raised them in a really graduated manner so that people using less water would still continue to pay a smaller amount. But as you go up in the tiers, 60,000 gallons a year, 80,000, we have some people here who have single households that are using hundreds and hundreds of thousands of gallons a year of water. And so in an attempt to both reflect the growing needs for revenue of the district, as well as to make sure that the water department is run on a cost neutral basis, we raised the rates. We raised them significantly higher for those in the higher tiers, the big water users who we identified as typically being people with in-ground irrigation systems connected to the public water supply and or swimming pools. So those people were being asked to pay more because they were using water in a way that wasn't representing the public health, which is our main mission here. So with that in mind, we raised the rates. We brought in significantly more revenue. We went from $364,000 of excess water revenue in the year before raising the rates to the first full year of the new rates. We raised over $1.1 million. So we didn't raise the rates just to make more money. We raised the rates to reflect the costs of the department, and those costs have also grown over time. In FY19, $611,000 for operating expenses, not including capital and employee benefits. And most recently in FY22, up to $705,000 in operations. So the department is now funding itself for operations and contributing towards the capital expenses of the district. And at the same time, we've noticed just in the last year or so that we have reduced the volume of water pumped by 17% on an annual basis. And some of this we've learned is reflecting whether we are in a drought year or not, because obviously in a drought, more water is being used for irrigation. But we also think that it has to do with the fact that a lot of people, in fact, 82 people, have now migrated their in-ground irrigation systems from the public water supply, where we're pumping water out of the ground, treating it, putting it up in the water tanks, running it through expensive pipes all over the village to be splayed out on people's lawns to grow grass. It didn't make any sense. So they've made their own investment in their own private wells on their own private property to tie up to their irrigation systems and eliminate the need to use the public water supply for irrigation. So we did a little study recently that I pointed out. Those on Zoom won't be able to see it. It's a map available at the department headquarters. So Professor Horton may explain some of these maps in a little bit, but this is the one that I wanted to point out. You can't see it either, but all these little red stars are private irrigation wells that have been installed in just the past 3 or 4 years since the rates were raised. You'll see that 78% of them are outside of what we call the zone of contribution to our well fields. These are the 4 main wells, the 5th well over here. So these are wells that are capturing groundwater that's simply migrating out to sea. It's not affecting the aquifer, the groundwater source that we use to pump our well fields. This is another example of the area where well field is drawing water. This is a more delineated version of that, based on some hydrogeology consulting work that we've done in recent years. So the point is that we have reduced the volume of water demanded. Some of that is based on raising the rates. Some of it's based on the fact that we no longer allow new irrigation systems to be connected to the public water supply. People that already have them can stay on it. They can pay the higher fee. If they put in a new well, they'll probably recoup their investment in 5 or 7 years. But this all goes back to the fact that the rates affect policy and affect behavior, as far as I'm concerned. So with the significant raise in the rates for the high volume users, I think it's important to recognize that people who conserve water deserve a break. And so what we're proposing is to basically cut in half from $80 a year for the minimum amount of 20,000 gallons a year. Cut that from $80 a year down to $40 a year, cut it in half. So everybody who's connected to the public water supply will essentially save $40 a year. Not a big deal. But I think it represents the fact that we are trying to make sure that there is this affordability access to clean drinking water that the district provides. So the handout here outlines the policy and the rationale behind it, indicates what kind of effects could be achieved with this this rate cut. We would offset it by increasing again the volume, the heavy volume users, by adding 10 to 20% onto their on their rates to make up this shortfall of giving everybody a $40 cut. So I'm happy to answer any questions. The commissioners, I hope will vote on that either at their meeting tomorrow or in May, so that we can have this effective for the coming fiscal year beginning July 1st. And happy to take any questions or comments, and what do you think?
How would you describe the aquifer and how many of them are there?
How do we describe the aquifer in Katuah?
Shallow, is it plenty of water? We use it 50% or 80%. How does it recharge itself? What is the health of that pool of water that we're trying to use?
Right.
And manage?
Right. So I am not a trained hydrogeologist. I have one next to me here who can answer it. As a layman, I would say that Katuah is lucky to have a good source of clean water. We have a sand and gravel aquifer, which stores a lot of groundwater. All this rain that we've had recently, some of it will run off into the ocean, down the streets, into the bay. A lot of it will be captured by our sandy soils, percolating down into the aquifer. The most important part of the aquifer in Katuah is that area shaded in blue on the big map here. That's the area which we call the zone of contribution, the zone 2, as identified by the State Department of Environmental Protection. And that's the area in which the maximum pumping during a hot summer day when everybody wants water and the pumps are pumping like crazy. That's the area of land surface under which the groundwater is being sucked into those big wells, hundreds of gallons a minute produced by those wells. And so we have a small aquifer here in Katuah because we're a small village. You know, our well fields are only about 120 acres or so. Right next door in Centerville, Losterville, Marston's Mills, they have their own water department. They have at least over 1,000 acres for their well fields. So we're drawing from a very small defined pool of water, known as the zone of contribution, shaded in blue here in Katuah. And that's so far, the quality of that water has met all the standards that the state expects us to meet. You probably heard about the recent EPA warnings about PFAS, and I'm hoping that Scott will talk a little bit more about that. And that's a concern everywhere in the country, not just here. So far, our levels have been much lower than other parts of the Cape. He just knocked on wood. and I think he's right too. I don't think we want to get up on our high horse and say it's not a problem here. It's a problem everywhere. So does that answer your question? That's a very general answer to a general question.
Yeah, of course, my question is really about are we collectively shepherding a resource that has tremendous political implications if people start to say, well, you know, we just put another valve here, it'll be all right. And we came out of the wall years ago, so we're getting adjusted to this environment where in Malpo, it's used like a weapon. Water is used like a political weapon to try and manage growth. And if you have a scarcity of water, everyone knows, you limit the word develop. You limit your options. When you start to do that, then you start to more holes to water.
So
that's my
I'm going to ask my commissioners to butt in here, but I just want to say that the thing that sticks with me is one of your water commissioners in the last 6 years, is listening to my superintendent of 37 years experience, telling me that during times of heavy drought in the summer, his wells are starting to get close to sucking air. You know what that means? That means that there wasn't enough water in that particular summer morning. And he had to watch the levels as they came down to the screens to make sure that he's not sucking air. Because if he's sucking air too often, it's going to be a real problem. It's going to burn out the pumps for one thing. Is that right, Chris?
Right.
So those are things that we're mindful of. Adding more wells, I don't think is the solution to anything. You're just still drawing from the same limited amount of land and water supply.
I'll just adding more wells is a lot more difficult than it might sound. The permitting process of acquiring the land, going through the process and get those wells permitted is pretty substantial and it's very expensive. So the market.
I'm sorry. The object that you're using, can you go deeper, or is it just soft shallow water?
Well, the trick to finding a new well is not just the depth, it's finding the land area that is undeveloped. First of all, you need like a 12 to 15 acre piece of land that has nothing on it, the zone 1. Then you need to look at the zone 2, and you need to do pump tests. I mean, it could be done, but it would be expensive and it would be challenging. And frankly, the private well approach is much less expensive. It has other advantages. We're recycling some nutrients that are in the groundwater on their way to Patuit Bay, which is another big problem. We can recapture those and put those back on lawns as sort of an in situ treatment system. So there's a lot of advantages to going to private wells. In addition to taking the pressure out of Chris as well. The other thing we talked about earlier was when we pump the wells at maximum capacity, not only are they getting close to drawing the air, but they're pulling water from the little river and wetlands in that area, which causes ecological impacts. So we're trying to provide a clean, sustainable, affordable water supply. And one way to do that is to not, I think the market point, frankly, pumping groundwater from the production well, putting it up in the tower, treating it, running it around town, put on a lawn on the face of it is a little bit questionable whether that makes sense. It's going to be going a long way around and spending a lot of money. Where we have an alternative which is less expensive and less impactful.
Dave, you have a question? You have to talk louder, but people on, you know.
Okay, another we have here in the chart. Less than 20,000 gallons a year, 446 pounds, which is 20% of the total. What's the average usage of those that are less than 20,000 gallons a year?
Well, we have an average, we have, what is it, 2,300 services? Thank you. It's my own report. I don't have it. He has it. That makes sense. The average Patuit household uses 70,000 gallons per year. The median household uses 52,000 gallons a year. The 70,000 gallons a year is roughly what EPA estimates for the average American family at 75,000 gallons a year. Your question is about how many people using less than 20,000? How many of those are?
What is the mean?
I don't know. I don't know in each of these categories what the mean is for each of those. But if you're only using 20,000 gallons a year, you're not here very often. You're not here very much.
Understood, but what the point I'm trying to get to is, if we're really looking for conservation, and we want to encourage it, and we want to reward those who do conserve, why are we benefiting those people?
Why are we not what?
Benefiting those people who are using less than 20,000 gallons a year. Because right now, we're proposing everybody gets half, no matter how much you use, how much you pay.
Right.
But yet, even if people are here, one weekend a year, that's a lot of water that's saved there as a result. Why are we not giving them more incentive, or, hey, I need $1,000 gallons for $80 a year. Geez, you know, if I can be 30,000 get or 10,000 gallons, where's my incentive?
So there's a lot of ways you could slice this, obviously. Last year I was proposing to make it free for people using less than 20,000 gallons a year. I was soundly turned back with that idea. But I do think that we're trying to show, even if it's a symbolic gesture, that people who use less water should get some type of reward. We don't have enough staff to micromanage each level and provide graduated subsidies for each individual. We've got 6 tiers here. We're trying to make it as simple as possible. And that's
Do the meters that are red, may not go to every gallon you.
Yeah.
To the nearest.
Right.
We read to the nearest 1,000 and we read twice a year. So in a 6-month period, the first 10,000 gallons is covered under that minimum,
Yep.
whether you use it all or not.
So you still have.
We do. We do.
And on the 82 new wells, you said 72% are outside the primary.
Yeah, so that's what this graphic, again, these little red stars are showing the location, individual lots. Where they've been permitted, and so I have the numbers here. We had 20 private irrigation wells installed before 2020, that's before irrigation. Since that time, 82 wells have been installed. And 22 of the wells are within the zone 2. Okay, so they're sharing the same water supply. Those wells pump 5 to 20 gallons per minute. Our wells can pump 1,000 gallons. That's the size differential. So all of these ones on the outside, that's 78% are outside of our zone 2.
So roughly only of the 70% only. When you see that, what, 25% actually has an impact on all well field, is that correct?
22. And they're not really having an impact. It's basically the difference between taking a tiny sip and taking a big study.
Right, that has an impact on what's taken on. So all these 200,000 gallons greater than 93, how many of those, you know, are in the zone of
It doesn't really matter because they're all using the same water supply.
Okay, I'm a little confused on that one.
So these gallons,
It's not an impact. It's not work.
if then they're
Actually, maybe private wells, whether they are in the zone of contribution or outside the zone, do not impact public water supply.
Understood.
Doesn't matter.
Correct.
we're trying to protect the public water
Yes.
supply. Yes.
So. So if I put my live outside the zone of contribution. I put a private well, it doesn't.
Right.
If I have 387 people plus 93 inside the zone, that's a big impact. Right?
No, there wouldn't be an impact inside the zone either.
I must be staying at all.
I'm sorry.
I must not be being very clear.
He's saying it,
387 plus 93 accounts within the zone of contribution, taking over 200,000 gallons a year through the profit water supply. That's pretty significant.
I don't think a private irrigation well could pump 200,000 gallons a year.
Yeah, I'm not following you.
Vic?
We want to encourage you to go play private wells.
What are we trying to accomplish? Are we trying to push the large water users into paying more of the bills of water companies? Or are we trying to push them to putting down more private bills? And I've expressed this opinion before, the more private bills you have, the more potential sources of pollution you have. And, you know, yeah, it's a remote possibility, but 5, 10 years from now, somebody says, oh, you know, we're not used to it, well, let's put waste over down or whatever. All those wells can contribute to contaminating our water system. Anyway, by shifting the burden from small users, are we rewarding them, or are we attempting to lower their tax burden or out of pocket expenses? Because if that's the case, the town of Barnstable has a program that accomplish that. So it's a matter of social engineering to shift the burden to the high users and probably the people with more resources. Then, you know, the water company's mission is to provide clean, safe water. If you go to your mission statement, that's what it is. And the first order of business why the water company was formed was for fire, and then second for residents. But I'm confused about what we're trying to accomplish here. And in terms of social contribution and stuff, I spent my career on ocean. And the hydraulic is that there to tell you, you don't know where that plume is going until you contaminate it. And drill 100 test wells to find out where whatever is contaminated is going. So, you know, it's nice to look at a map and say, well, here's where the water is flowing in those wells. The other thing you're doing is you're putting more by having all these private wells on our electric supply. And, you know, if these owners that have drilled those wells probably realize that when they get their electric bills, and it's not a cheap or inexpensive proposition to start running the water. Here, or, you know, in other areas. But I'm having a hard time grasping what we're trying to do here. Is it social engineering? Is it to protect the town water supply? Or are we trying to shift the burden or get the larger to drill their own well? And I think you're right. If I understood your point, if one of those large users or more are inside the zoning contribution and they're pumping 200,000 gallons or more a year, they're going to have an impact on our town wells, particularly in the drought area. Right now, I don't think it's a problem. I think so.
Cut in, and this was about affordable access. You guys want to know, and we've gotten way off track. So I'd like to bring it around, because I don't want to be here all night and another presentation. So I'm going to like summarize and help us move along. That Mark and the commissioners were presenting about affordable access to water and the new plan, which is to provide everybody with the first 20,000 gallons at a reduced rate versus what he originally recommended a year ago, which was at no cost. And in order to make sure that that works, they're raising the rates on the high users who are obviously using our drinking water to irrigate their lawns. All the other stuff we're talking about, I would suggest you attend one of their meetings or watch a lot of their meetings, because they do talk a lot about that.
I have a question. I don't understand what you think this is going to accomplish. I'm very fortunate, as a lot of people in this room are. I don't need, I don't worry about it for $40 a year. I do know that growing up in this building, that there are people that are concerned about $40 a year, and those people certainly need to be taken care of. I know Jen does pay payment plans for people. And it's Jen came to me and said, we've got somebody that they probably can afford to do more than $10 a year. That's fine with me. I don't have a problem with that. I do have a problem with everybody else getting the burden. Clean water is the problem. We have clean water. We've always had clean water. There are places in this world where they don't have any clean water. So I just think reducing it for everybody is just virtue signaling. And I think if you've got a teenager at home, they're going to zoom through that 20,000 gallons, in a couple of days. You know, a lot of people think, well, I better break it, I'm not paying as much, so I need more. So I just don't understand the reason you think we need to do this, just. I think, and another thing I'll say is. The last year that you have the income and the and the over, and what you call the overage, which pays for all the benefits, and the various other things for the staff and water department. Is $1.25 million. Well, this year, it's not gonna be that, because the pumping's there. And last time I calculated, it looked like it was gonna be, above and beyond, what you have to pay for the benefits, retirement, et cetera. It's only gonna be about $70,000. So, you know, they have to be careful that you don't get so low that we go back to the same situation we were before, the taxpayer was supporting the water.
Right, so these are all great comments, and we're gonna take them under advisement, and we'll, we have a meeting here tomorrow night at 5:45, if people would like to come and continue the conversation. We do want to get to Scott and his presentation. Which, and his presentation will not be shown.
Well, what I'm gonna do
And the
is,
people on Zoom, see it?
I have a presentation here, which you're gonna have a really hard time seeing. So what I'm gonna do is, because people that are on Zoom can see this, we couldn't get the projector. So, I'm gonna talk to the people on Zoom with my slides here, and then I'm gonna walk up to the boards and explain to you people. So I'm gonna go back and forth and do the best I can, because the system is not working. So, this presentation is about source water protection, and which is something that the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has promoted nationally for about 25 years, and Mass DEP has been promoting for about the same period of time. Bottom line is, and I'll show you a couple examples, you can save a lot of money. We can also provide much longer term protection of the water supply by using these techniques. So I'm going to just kind of walk through a little bit about what this means, source water protection, and we have some options we're considering, including our really what I'm going to get to is a proposed change in our enabling legislation, which dates back to 1935. And I'll say it now and I'll say it again later. We're a little out of date. Our legislation really doesn't allow us to do what we're supposed to be doing today, which is protect the water. I'll get back to that in a couple of minutes.
It does give us the power to create fountains.
It does. So again, I'll point up there. Maybe you could be my pointer. You want to just point to the zone 2 map, the blue, big blue area? Again, just to be clear, this is a protection area. It's called a zone 2 wellhead protection area. It is a worst case, probably never occurs, area from which the wells draw. It assumes the wells are pumped at continually pumped at maximum pumping capacity, which Chris would never do because the pump would burn out. So that's an impossibility. And then secondly, it assumes 180 days of no rainfall recharge, which even with climate change, we're probably not going to see that. So this zone is, it's very conservative, which is a good thing, protecting water. But as Mark mentioned, we've been doing some more work here, and we point to that one. We've hired a hydrogeologist who's run a groundwater model, and we have a much better idea now, accurately where the water is actually coming from to get to our wells. And you can see if you contrast, you kind of go back and forth between those big blue zone 2 areas and these narrower red lines and color them that show the actual contributing areas to the wells. So the point here is we've done some studies over the last 2 years, and frankly, I think we're the only water department on the Cape that has this information, as far as I know. So we're really getting into some detail here. We know more precisely and accurately where the water is coming from. And you can see that map is on an assessor's base map, so we can actually see which land areas, which parcels are actually contributing the recharge. Recharge is the amount of water that goes from the land surface down into the groundwater and then flows towards the well. Now, before there were any people here, it was rainfall that would fall on the land surface, percolate down and go to the well. But as you can see in these zones of contribution, we have residential lots, homes, and septic systems. So in addition to the recharge coming from precipitation, we are, I'll use the term injecting sewage into the groundwater, which is essentially what a Title V septic system is, which then flows to the well. So a certain percentage, I know this is not good news, but I'm going to be honest, a certain percentage of the water that we serve, including all of the public water supply, almost all the public water supply in the state, and certainly all the ones in the state, part of that water goes through a septic system before it gets to the well, which is not really a good thing. And that's what we're trying to focus on here. So I want to talk a minute about PFAS. Septic systems, as I'll get to a little bit later, really, you may have heard of Title V, which is the state law that governs septic systems. That law was developed as a public health code. The purpose of this is to get the wastewater out of the house and into the ground. It was never intended to protect groundwater or drinking water. There's very little or nothing in the law to protect groundwater, to get it out of the house and get it in the ground. It works very well for that. However, we're putting a lot of stuff in the groundwater, and as you can see in these areas, it then flows to our wells. And there's a whole bunch of contaminants that we have to test, and as Mark mentioned earlier, and Chris's great work, so far, we've met every single standard we're asked to test for, which is great. We have a pretty good, pretty clean, very clean water supply. However, as time goes on, we know more about the different types of contaminants that are showing up in our water supplies. And the latest one is called PFAS, which is per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. It's a group of chemicals that are used in a variety of products that we all have in our houses. And that standard, those chemicals have been found to be carcinogenic at very, very low concentrations. So there's a national standard and a state standard of 20, it was 20 parts per trillion. It's proposed now to go down to 4 parts per trillion, which is very low. Many water supplies in the state have either had to shut down. You probably heard about Hyannis. They had to stop supplying water in some areas as part of the town water supply. They had to connect to the town of Yarmouth and get water, and now they're building very expensive treatment plants. So that's one option. We have plenty of money and we don't mind spending it. We can build a treatment plant. But we have some better ideas, and I say better because they're less expensive, and we want to save money. So, and that gets to source water protection. And I'm just going to talk maybe briefly about the best example I know of. I'm just going to go to my last slide for starters, forward quickly here. The New York City water supply is one of the best examples in the country. And I'll just read you some of these numbers. They get a lot of their water supply from the Catskill Mountains. And when the Safe Drinking Water Act came online and required treatment, they were faced building a treatment plant, and the cost of that treatment plant was $6 to $10 billion. The annual cost of running it was $1.5 billion. So they said, well, we have any options here? And one option was, instead of building a treatment plant, to do source water protection up in the Catskills, protect the source rather than treating it. And that's exactly what they've done. They're working with the Catskills community. One of the things that I've got in the slide, and we'll look at this later, is they've been installing upgraded septic systems in the Catskills. The cost is $100 million per year of doing this. The cost of the treatment plant was, as I said, 6 to 10 billion plus 250 million per year. So the overall cost is about 10% of what New York City would have paid for treatment plant. Quabbin Reservoir has done the same thing. They opted not to treat and do source water protection, much less expensive. So we have an opportunity to do this. Some towns it's too late. If the contaminant is already there, then you got to treat it. We're in a good position here where the levels that we've tested for are low. They're below the standard, but we do have PFAS in the drinking water supply. So we need to do something about it. We've got 5 years to figure this out. If they maintain where they are now, which is just below standard, we might be okay. At which point we might have to build build a treatment plant. David gave a presentation to the town's council last week, was it? And I had a great discussion there. I think that's online for people to look at. The cost of building a treatment plant here for PFAS and other things we need is more than $10 million for the Katuitt Water District. We don't have a firm price yet because we haven't had the design, but let's say $10 to $20 million to build a treatment. Okay. Because of these maps we have here, we know where the water is coming from. There's about between 50 and 75 septic systems that are in those zones. So another option is to upgrade the septic system using a new technology that actually has a wood chip based biowood. If some of you may have heard about them over at Schubel's Pond in Barnstable, we're doing some testing and they're having excellent results. These are being tested by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the United States Geological Survey, Mass DEP. A lot of people are involved in this, and the results are very, very good. The cost of installing the systems are around $40,000. If you do the math, this is around $1.5 million to upgrade the septic systems in those zones, as opposed to maybe $10 to $20 million doing the treatment. And again, I pointed the example of New York City, Bob Reservoir, many other places where they saved about 90% on the cost by protecting at the source, rather than letting the pollution come to the supply and putting an expensive treatment plant. So this is what we're looking at. We're looking at a program to evaluate this. We're not ready to pull the trigger on it, but we're in the planning and design phase. But what we found out when we first started talking about this is that our existing legislation, which was written in 1935,
For the Katuitt Fire District.
right, did not anticipate source water protection, because that was invented around 1990, 60 years later. So we've met with our council to look at our legislation. We have some proposed language, which is pretty simple. And it would enable us to, if we decide to do this, it would enable us to provide some assistance to some of those homeowners in the zone 2 area, excuse me, in the zone of contribution areas, upgrade their systems. Right now, there are some people that believe you can't work on private land. I'm not necessarily one of them, because frankly, we already have worked on private land and many water supplies do. So I'm not necessarily in agreement that we can't do it. But some people have said we should amend the legislation to make it more clear, and I'm all for that. So we've got the council on board. He's drafted the legislation. And I do have a slide here, which I'll just go back to for the people further on Zoom, and maybe I'll just read it here. We don't have a handout for it. But here's the language. It was drafted by Mark Boudreau, our attorney, that he recommended. It says to do all things necessary to petition the Massachusetts legislature to enact a change to the enabling legislation of the Katuitt Fire District substantially as follows. The Water Department of the Katuitt Fire District shall have the authority to fund improvements on private land with the full approval of the property owner, protect the water supply and quality for the benefits of the residents of Katuitt. That's the language that we're proposing. That will be at the district meeting to get support. I've already met with our state representative who sponsored this in the state legislature. He believes this will be sort of a relatively easy thing to get through if we get the support of the residents. So that's the first step, to hear this at our district meeting and enable us to do, frankly, what I think we need to be able to do. We've run past the 1935 legislation. It's time to look at it and give us a little bit more power to do things that might assist us in protecting the water. The other thing I'll just mention, then I'll stop and maybe take questions, is where does PFAS come from? There's a lot that's been published recently, and Jen put something on our website today, which you can go look at. The most public is something that I found was actually a Time magazine article, which is pretty good. And what it does is it goes through all the scientific studies that have been done to see what we all have in our households that have PFAS in. And you may have heard some of this. One thing that's been talked about is non-stick cooking. That's pretty well documented that has PFAS in it. So when you cook something in that, you're ingesting it. When you wash those pans, it's going down the drain into the septic system, into the groundwater. The other thing I recently learned about, this is kind of funny one, but toilet paper. Many brands of toilet paper have a whole bunch of PFAS in them. Some brands of toilet paper don't have any. So a lot of this could come down to household selection of products, if you will, using safer cookery, selecting certain toilet paper, shampoos. Some shampoos, you believe it or not, have PFAS in them. I don't want to put that in my hair, but we can make a choice. So the other thing we're going to try to do is get information out to residents. I suspect some people don't care about this and be concerned about having direct contact and ingesting the PFAS. Others may not care, but some people I think will care. Well, we care about it going to the ground. So what we're going to try to do is, in addition to this study of looking at upgrading the septic systems, we're also going to try to reach out to residents and educate them on the types of products that might be out in the household, which they could fairly easily substitute simply by selecting a different product that's available. It doesn't have PFAS in it. This information is available, so we're going to try to get that out there. And we did put one article on the district website. We'll be providing more as we go forward. We're all learning about this together because PFAS thing is relatively new, and a lot of people are very concerned about it. So we're going to start providing more and more information so that residents here can make some informed choices about this, and hopefully we can try to not only keep it from physical contact with people, but also from going down the drain in the house, which again, keep in mind, the septic system goes right into the groundwater, and we know which septic systems are heading towards our wells. So I think we can be smart about this and probably come up with a cost-effective approach to reduce the health effects and also save us a bunch of money, potentially. So that's pretty much what I wanted to say. I have a bunch of slides. I apologize for not being able to show them here. But I think that kind of covers most of the points. And I'll just stop there and see if people have comments, thoughts, or questions. We're really looking for feedback. John,
Hey, thanks. Is that $40,000 for replacement or retrofit existing?
yeah, that's a good question. It's actually an average of the two. Because there have been studies done in Falmouth and over in Barnstable, a full replacement is probably like 55,000. And what we're getting, let me explain what we're talking about here. There are two components to a standard septic system, which is a septic tank, which separates solids, and then a leach field. This treatment system I'm talking about actually goes in the middle. It's another concrete tank that has limestone, wood chips, aerators in it, and that's for the treatment purpose. So what John's asking about is a retrofit. You keep your existing septic tank in your leach field that those are in good condition, and you put this treatment system in the middle. A complete redo is replacing all three. So that depends on a case-by-case basis. The studies that have been done in Falmouth and here in Barnstable, where they've been doing this, shows that on average, it's about a 50-50 deal in terms of who has to replace the whole thing. So the 40 number I throw out is halfway between 25 to 30 to install just the treatment system, up to 50 to 55 for the full replacement. Yes.
Well, how do they make the determination that the system is in need of retrofitting or replacement?
That
Just assuming that all of them are bad.
right. That would be a case-by-case basis, and as you may know, when you sell your house, you have to have a Title V inspection done.
Right.
And this would be the same kind of thing that would have to be done. Actually, first thing you can do is go to the Board of Health and get the existing plans. So it's a relatively new system in the last 10, 15 years. It probably meets Title V. And the Board of Health will have those records, and then that can be confirmed with an on-site inspection.
So you're proposing that the water department cover the cost of the inspection?
No, the inspections will be done. I mean, there's a number of ways this can occur. And actually, there are a number of towns doing this now. Wellesley, Borough, and the town of Tisbury, mostly on Martha's Vineyard, is actually doing this pretty routinely. Any new construction in Tisbury requires one of these systems. Any real estate transaction in Tisbury requires one of these systems. So these things are going in routinely over there. And what they are doing is you're leaving up to the homeowner to hire an engineer inspector to do the survey of the property, to do the design, And then the town is working with them and basically cost sharing the systems. And that would be completely up to us how we want to do that. Most of the towns that I'm working with, believe that some sort of a cost share makes sense. Because the private property owner is going to gain, a new system on their property, but the residents are going to gain by cleaner water. So it's kind of two objectives.
Question, this new septic system, does that capture the feedback or destroy it? And the second question is, where does the unit fit in the town master plan for sewer? Is that?
Yeah, I have a slide on that too. So I met with the DPW a number of times, and the area that's on the map here, I refer to as Mariners Circle. That's one of the roads. And that area is in the sewer plan, which is a 30-year plan at the last part. And I met with them as recently as the week before, last week. And they said best case 10 years, but more likely in that 20 to 30-year period, that's when the sewer might get there. And it's also going to be a good deal more expensive than what we're talking about here. But certainly that is an option. But again, the problem is we have a 5-year window here to work on this. And the earliest the sewer might show up would be 10 years. More likely, I think 20 would be my guess from what I've been reading. And then the other thing that's going on, you may have heard about is, and I think David was at the most recent meeting at the town council. The town is really looking at financing because the costs are going up and up and up. So the costs that were initially put out there actually have gone up even higher. So there's some questions about how much of the sewer system, will really be able to afford to build. It's just a question, that's all.
The other part of the question was, is that new septic system would just capture the feedback or?
Well, that's one of the studies that's going on right now. There's some best work that's being done in my opinion is down in Long Island, where they have many of these out there, and they're testing a long list of chemicals, so-called contaminants of emerging concern, pharmaceuticals, flame retardants that come out of clothing when you wash your clothes. And these systems are removing many of those compounds. The PFAS testing is in process right now. The person I'm dealing with in Long Island suggested it's the same type of chemical, so we should expect pretty good results. But we would not do this unless and until we have those results. And those are being tested right now. So right now, we're just asking for authority if we want to do this kind of. Right now, we might decide, the way it stands right now, we might decide in a year or two we want to do this. Some people are going to say we can't do it because of our 1935 legislation. So all we're suggesting now is let's at least have the ability to do this if in fact we want to do it. So some of that testing is still honestly ongoing right now.
I just really want to thank you guys for being ahead of it. As I mean, we are really lucky to have the level of expertise that our water commissioners are bringing, and have brought in the past. And, this is really ahead of, instead of waiting to have a PFAS problem and having to build a 10 million or more treatment center, this idea is, let's get ahead of it. And I think back on the many decades of things throughout where I've lived and other places where people were like, no, we don't need to do that, right? And then years later, they would have done it, and now it's way more expensive. So I've been following your guys' meetings and this, which has been going on for a couple of years of studying, and I just think it's wonderful where we're at. And the enabling legislation is a problem, and it's a process to have our state representative, the pigs, has to present the request at the state house up in Boston and get their approval to change something that's happening, our enabling legislation, in order for the fire district to be able to spend taxpayers' money on doing some of these projects. So that's what all those things are. And first has to pass at the annual district meeting at the end of May. Then it's got to go up to the state to get their approval, and then it has to come back to another district meeting for approval on the amount of money. And so that's how that whole process works. So this is just the very beginning of that step, where these guys have spent many years doing the study, which is, remarkable.
Carol, thank you for those comments. Let me just say, I haven't had a chance to our fellow commissioner, David Turbuck, to say anything. I don't want to put him on the spot. He's done a lot of research on this.
Yes.
He had a great meeting at the town council.
I
Do
heard.
you want to just say a couple of words about that meeting?
Well, one thing that became clear is that we're very fortunate, but we're in a very precarious position because Mashpee has a significant PFAS problem from the Joint Base Cape Cod and the firefighting foams with levels over 200 parts per trillion against a standard that's now 4 parts per trillion. Fortunately, that plume is about 3 miles away from us and no closer than the Quashnet River. But there are neighborhoods in Mashpee that cannot drink the water and are restricted to bottled water. The deputy commissioner of the Mass Department of Environmental Protection told the town council that with the new EPA regulations, that 90 public water systems in the state are in violation and will need to treat, one of which is calm. And the well fields for Centerville, Osterville, Marston's Mills, as Mark said, they have a vast amount of open space, but their Hayden well field is right behind Stop and Shop. So as they go, we have interconnection agreements with both Mashpee and in case of an emergency, and we'll provide each other water. I'm not raising any concerns about contaminating ourselves with their water, but we're right in the middle. And one thing that became clear from the mapping of the aquifer that was done by Sole Source Consulting is that the source of our water isn't coming straight down from the sky. It originates somewhere north in the military reservation, flows through Sandwich and Mashpee and hits us. It goes through one of the most polluted bodies of water on the Cape, Peters Pond, which has cyanobacteria and apparently is so polluted they can see it from space. We're dodging the bullet here. And the good news, I think that past commissions have cracked the capacity problem of sucking air into these wells. And the Barnstable Water Department is looking at a $25 million price tag for a new well to replace the ones they lost to PFAS at the firefighting academy. So new wells are not cheap. I think that at this point, we're in good shape, and the past commissions that did put water treatment on the long-term capital budget were mostly concerned with rising levels of manganese, iron, and sodium, and none of which are in violation now, but are at levels of concern. And some of these are well, all of these are pretty much naturally occurring. But I think that by backing off on the capacity issue, Mark said that we saved 17% of the gallons pumped year on year. We saved 31% from the peak in the summer of 21, which I believe was the year on record, or one of the years on record. And also, this district's no stranger to losing wells or emergencies. The gasoline leak at the low station polluted a well with MTBE, and that's a very pernicious bad substance. And there's none now, but that caused a huge problem. I think it forced the past commission to build the latest well, which was 1995, over on Route 28, right against Mashpee.
And your presentation is available on the Town of Barnstable website.
It is.
At Town Council.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just one other thing, Scott, correct me. I do think that carbon filtration in the home is a good way to get rid of PFAS. Is that true?
Yeah.
There is an ANSI standard filter. They cost about $200 to $500 for replaceable cartridges that will remove PFAS, along with a host of other stuff.
If you want to look at filters, home filters, my recommendation would be go to US EPA's website. They have an independent review of all the different technologies, and educate yourself a little bit because there's many options. And there are plenty of vendors who will sell you all kinds of stuff. Some of it's good, some of it's maybe not necessary. So my suggestion would be to go to EPA's website first, so we could probably get that on the website too. Because they've done a lot of research on all the different treatment technologies. Right now, I don't think you need to do it, frankly. I think we're meeting all the standards, but we're just trying to think ahead, as Carol's suggesting. We're looking all around us, as Dave said, we got it on Mashpee, we got it in Hyannis, we're trying to thread the needle here. And frankly, I think we're trying to, stay ahead of the game a little bit. But right now, I think we're in pretty good shape.
Any other questions?
Sorry, I got a two-parter. I'm just curious, if all of these were installed today, how long would it take for us to feel the effects, and what would those effects be? Just real quick, I know this is about enabling legislation. Are there any other, as far as I'm curious, are there any other changes that the fire district is can bundle in with this enabling legislation, or is it just this one thing goes all the way up and it comes down? So two other changes that have been there.
There is another change, I believe, on the table of requests from the Historical Society.
Oh, yeah, okay.
On the timing issue, John, the nearest septics are probably within a year's time of travel, months. And then as you go further back, up higher part of that, you're probably talking 2, 3, 4 years travel time. So ideally, what we'd love to do is try to get the ones closest. And frankly, we probably can do this using just travel time. How long does it take the groundwater to get from those lots to the well? So to answer John's question, the closest one is down there. I'll point to it. Probably on the order of 6 months. So from this lot right here, that well, it's about a 6-month travel. From here, probably more like a year or 2 or 3 to get down there. So it will take some time to see the results. But we could do this with something called adaptive management. We try doing 10 of these at a pretty low cost. See if we can develop. But doing the ones closest, if we could get, we want to do this cooperatively with homeowners. It's not anything's going to be required. It's working with homeowners who are willing to work with us. It's exactly how you did it in Falmouth, but it didn't require fully voluntary.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Are there any grants that you can avail yourself on?
Good point, because I learned in looking at the Shubal bond trial that's primarily funded by the EPA and the state. So if you move first, I think, there would be grants available, but the other fire districts did complain last week at the town council that they're having a very hard time getting any grant applications approved, and the town is willing to help us band together on grant applications so that we could bundle them and maybe get the attention of funding sources.
Work every angle.
Right.
All right, well, again, thank you. We'll look forward to seeing everybody on Saturday, the 4th at the Federated Church for the special district meeting. That's the next big thing happening here for fire district. And then the annual district meeting and voting is going to be then. Maybe do it current coming out again and then we will allow you to together. Have any questions, please? Ask your commissioner, attend meetings, watch their videos. You got some great people working for this fire district, and $5+ million budget that's part of the fire. Thank you.